I am Lynn Bacani. You're watching Maritime Viewpoints on Marino World Online. Joining us are Dr. Conrad Oka, President of the Associated Marine Officers and Seamen's Union of the Philippines, or AMOSUP, and Mr. Stephen Cotton, Secretary General of the International Transport Workers Federation, or ITF. Great to have you both on the program, Dr. Oka and Sir Steve.
Great to be here, Lynn. Thank you very much for inviting us and inviting my boss. Steve is my boss. So thank you, boss, for coming.
Thanks, Lynn. It's always a pleasure to see you and to share the message about quite how important what you do, but what all the Filipino seafarers and, of course, my friend and colleague and sometimes inspiration, Dr. Conrad Oka, has done so much for Filipino seafarers. So it's fantastic to be online with you today.
Such a privilege. So how many IMO member states have already recognized our seafarers as key workers? And do we really realize this, recognizing seafarers as essential workers?
Do you want me to go first, Conrad, or
yes, please? Yes, please.
Okay, so we're up
beauty before age.
I wish. So we're up over 70, but I think, as we've said throughout this kind of crisis period, the governments have been severely challenged about how to respond to the COVID crisis. And we've said on many occasions, it's acceptable that they put in social restrictions to protect their societies, protect those that are at risk to COVID. But we feel, certainly in the ITF and all of the seafarers unions, and many ship owners, I would add, that governments don't really understand how shipping and the global supply chain works. And so for us, we've lobbied extremely hard in many different governments, the European Union, North America, to get the key status recognized. And we've signed statements with ship owners and other groups. But the frustration is, at the moment, it hasn't eased the situation the way we feel it should. So for us in the ITF, I think from the beginning of this month, really, we're going for a renewed push throughout all of the UN agencies. So whether that's the International Labour Organization, who've been very supportive, International Maritime Organization, and we're meeting with their Secretary General Kitak Lim this week to talk about this. We are asking them to renew the pressure on governments, not just to implement positive steps around key workers, and in that sense, I mean not just seafarers, but truck drivers, aviation, all those people that move the world's goods, but also that we need a vaccination solution, and we need it sooner rather than later. So for us, it's been very frustrating, but the UN agencies have tried very hard, but sometimes it's difficult to get governments to listen.
Dr. Oka, how vulnerable are our seafarers to COVID-19? For the Philippines, we recognize already the seafarers as key workers, right? And you're coordinating with our government officials.
Yes, we are very fortunate that the government has recognized the seafarers as key workers and putting us on the A1 priority list also, from P3, I think, to then A4 and then A1. So right now, if you're a seafarer, you can just go to any local government unit who is administering a vaccine, so that you can be prioritized when you get the vaccine. So it is really very important that we become key workers, and that we get the green lanes for crew change, and aside from that, we get priority in testing and vaccination. But in vulnerability wise, seafarers are very vulnerable. As just like any other person in the population, we are very vulnerable to COVID-19. Once you get out into the general population, everybody gets really vulnerable. But I guess because of the nature of the job, if you are confined to a small place, traveling over the seas, you're not very much exposed to the outside world, unless someone gets in on your cohort, in the cohort that you are in, and that's the problem that we are facing right now. So right now, it's we partnered with the IMEC also, and also with the ITF. ITF had the initiative to have our safe corridor passage with together with the SG Star. So hopefully we can make seafarers. We can have seafarers who are not COVID positive go on board the ships. Thank you.
I understand AMOSUP is really active in the vaccination rollout. So are the AMOSUP seamen centers maximized for this vaccination rollout? How many seafarers now through AMOSUP were vaccinated?
Yes, thank you, Lynn. We are really very much into the vaccination program together with the Maritime Industry Authority, the Department of Transportation. They have given us vaccines for our seafarers because they are in the priority list. So we administer the vaccines to our Seamen's hospitals in Manila, Cebu, Iloilo, and Davao. And so far we have vaccinated close to 20,000 seafarers already. Together also with the other local government units who are very responsive and are very who want seafarers really to go on board and get on with their jobs.
So Steve, how do ITF and your affiliates work for the vaccination programs for our seafarers?
Okay, so for us from the outset of this process, as Conrad said, we've collaborated and worked closely with the different employers groups. So our social partner, International Maritime Employers Committee, which we've set up this sort of very reliable pre-embarkation process, and we put quite a lot of money into that. We've recognized that it was critical that seafarers get key status. I should have said it was the actual accurate number is 64 out of 174 IMO states, so not enough is the point there. But the reality is also that we've had to lobby extensively to get governments to recognize that key status should give you special benefits. And again, it's great that the Philippines government, after the initial demarcation, moved seafarers up the list. But what have we been doing? So we've been lobbying the Secretary General of the UN, and we've been talking to them about how do we get help with the World Health Organization to recognize that even though we've got the whole globe to vaccinate, that seafarers should be in the top percentage. And we're in ongoing discussions with them. And again, I think as with everything in this life, it's a supply and demand question. Many governments move very quickly to secure supplies. Some governments were not in the same financial position to secure supplies, and others are still struggling now. And it's not just the global south, global north divide. We've seen the issues with Australia moving slowly, which has massively impacted on the movement of seafarers for those that trade on Australia. So in real terms, what are we doing? We're lobbying all the agencies. So we've been working with the ILO and the IMO. We've done joint letters to the Secretary General and the World Health Organization asking us to get access. So we have to respect, and we have, that the frontline workers, so what I mean by that, healthcare workers that have been dealing with COVID in such a brave and tremendous way around the world, are the first group to be protected. Obviously, then the people that support them in dealing with the crisis, ambulance, police, public services. But we are arguing, and we will continue to argue, that seafarers and other transport workers that have kept our economies going, kept the supply of food delivered to the supermarkets, should get a special dispensation. And we're arguing that there's a humanitarian term in the COVAX. So COVAX is the UN agency that allocates the vaccines. They should make a dispensation, and we're in conversations. And we hope that this month we will be lobbying at the United Nations General Assembly, and we'll be lobbying not just as the ITF, but with the International Road Union, which is the Truck Drivers Association, or the Owners Association, the International Chamber of Shipping, which is the recognized employers group, and also IATA, which is the Civil Aviation Employers Group. So it's quite unique. Since I've been in the ITF probably too long to mention, but I've never seen a period where we've collaborated with employers groups and or focused on governments to get them to make their decisions. The ITF is been ready to secure special places where we can deal with this problem. So we're in extensive conversations with the Singapore government, who've just announced that they will allow vaccination for seafarers embarking on ships through Singapore, which is great news and the stuff that we've been working on for 18 months to make happen. We're in extensive discussions with the Qatari authorities and Qatar Airways to allow Johnson & Johnson to be administered in the airport on the way to join vessels. And I was in Qatar 2 weeks ago, and a big shout out to Qatar Airways, because we've not always seen eye to eye on issues, but they've opened a seafarers lounge, and I visited the lounge and it was packed. So I should say to all of our Filipinos who are seafarers who are transiting Doha Airport, you have your own lounge. There is food, there is snacks, there is drinks, and that's massive credit to the Qatar Airways, who've recognized the need of the seafarers. So, I mean, Lynn, later in the conversation, we should talk about respect, because there's a big issue for me about the lack of respect for seafarers. But the ITF is continuing to do everything it can. We would like to see, and this is a little bit controversial, a cross-border methodology of recognition for a seafarer who's been vaccinated. At the moment, I've traveled a bit over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Every country has different processes. Every country has different rules. And what I hear from the ship owners, it's chaos. Like one rule one day, a different rule next day. We were allowed to embark a seafarer today. Now the rules have changed somewhere else. And you know, our friends, Conrad's members and the other Filipino seafarers that are represented by other unions, not all ITF, I might add, but they are critical that they get proper respect. So we're fighting really hard for lots of vaccinations.
You mentioned particularly the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Should the industry demand for the one-shot vaccine brand, given the nature of the work of our seafarers?
Yes, it's like, unfortunately, it's common sense, right? If a seafarer is going to go from home to a ship, it's not so easy to do the other vaccines that take an initial shot and then a booster. So for us, we've been advocating, and we've contacted Johnson & Johnson directly. The rules are, the government rules is that you cannot contract as a commercial entity with the providers of the vaccine. We do hear from the WHO that the fourth quarter of this year, there should be much more ready supply, and there may be the potential of some more vaccines being approved who could be of the one-shot nature. But at the moment, the ITF, together with the industry, has been lobbying to get Johnson & Johnson to set aside some vaccines that we could then roll out globally. And our initial position is to establish hubs like Singapore, like Doha, like other parts in the European Union. At the moment, we've got our American unions have been very successful in convincing the American authorities that unused vaccine in North America, and we've seen their numbers surge recently, can be given to seafarers. But of course, it's a little bit, can I say, haphazard. So you get your shot, you get off the vessel, you go to a vaccine, boom, you get your shot. Conrad has been immense. Again, and I don't want to underestimate it or embarrass him, but he has shown global leadership in this space. He was the first to get the PCR tests. He was the first to put in place processes, and he has been incredibly impressive through this period of crisis and leadership. Our friends in Indonesia have also, our other unions, because there's a few other labour supply countries, they've been able to secure 15,000 vaccinations for primarily cruise ship seafarers in Bali. Our Indian colleagues have also, India was hit extremely hard by the Delta variant, and we saw the terrible scenes on TV. But our Indian affiliates, NUSI, led by our good friend Abdul Ghani Sarang, and the Officers Union, MUI, have also been able to secure inside the process, because there are many Indian seafarers, but there's also many Indian flag. And finally, and not really finally, but European countries have also started to loosen up. So we've got Italy, UK, the Netherlands, Germany and Belgium are beginning to allow seafarers to have access to their underutilized supplies of the vaccine. if you don't mind, and I'm talking a bit too much, but we have lobby. There's a global movement. So all of the global union federations, not just transport workers, but industrial, oil and gas, retail, uni, we've all been lobbying for the big pharmacy multinationals on this occasion to withdraw their right to lock in the vaccine formulas. So at the moment, we're saying this can't be about profit. Yes, you may have spent a lot of money on research and development, but we must, as a global society, whether we're transport workers who we think are just behind the frontline workers, but it doesn't really matter. If you're wherever you are in the globe, global north, global south, east or west, we have to have a program that's based on equality and not money. So we're pushing for the world's authorities to put pressure on the pharmaceutical companies to roll out and license different places to manufacture the vaccines. Because I think for us, and again, we can talk about that a little bit later, this is not going away. Many of us, and Conrad and I, were global travelers. We know that you need to have vaccines to go for yellow fever. We know that you need to have other vaccines. And again, I was talking to a number of ship owners yesterday because it's Maritime Week here in London. And there is a lot of negative propaganda about vaccines. And I'll say here, should be able to show you my certificate somewhere. I'm fully vaccinated and I plan to live, shouldn't say this, might be unlucky, but quite a long and rich life. So I'm planning, I had vaccination because I want to come and visit the Philippines and I want to carry on doing the work that we need to do for transport workers. So our message must be throughout this, don't believe all the stories that you hear about the risks. Please, please, please take the vaccinations. The world needs the Filipino seafarer that has kept us going for so many decades. So for us, it's a big personal commitment to fight to make sure that all the Filipinos have enough vaccinations. So I stop there, but yeah, look, I mean, in the middle of last year, I saw the numbers for deployment, and in one month, you're normally deploying between 50 and 75 or 100,000 Filipinos. At 1 month last year, early in the crisis, April and May, it was down to 5,000 seafarers. And there's a big push on us. And I don't mean just us, the unions, but us as a shipping industry and us as, Filipinos bring a lot of money into the Philippines economy to get the recognition that seafarers deserve. Sorry, Lynn, I'm getting a bit carried away, but I am quite passionate about the lack of respect seafarers have received throughout this crisis.
Dr. Aka, I understand you sent an appeal to our government for the allocation of Johnson & Johnson vaccine for our seafarers. What was the response? Did you get any feedback already?
Yes, we early during the part where the vaccines were coming, we wrote letters to various government agencies who are responsible for vaccine procurement. Unfortunately, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, I think we only got around 1 or 2 million vaccines, right? And they allocated it for the senior citizens, for elderly people. So we weren't able to get any of the Johnson & Johnson vaccines, but we were able to get the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, and that's what we are giving right now to our seafarers, Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. Now, before I forget, Lynn, I'd like to thank also Steve Cotton and the Seafarers Trust, because we were able to get the much needed resources, especially for RT-PCR machines. Their support really was very immense and intense, and we were able to help a lot of Filipino seafarers get to the testing, especially for RT-PCR, especially during the early parts of this pandemic. Thank you very much.
So I'd like to get your quick reaction on this situation now, wherein many agencies are starting to require seafarers to complete their COVID jobs before giving them employment or giving them crew joining dates. Should COVID vaccination be mandatory for seafarers? as early as this time?
So on one hand, we're advocating very strongly that all seafarers should get a vaccination. But we also recognise that certain categories have some risk. Now, I don't think we can agree with manning agents that it should be compulsory, but we also understand the logic of risk management. So this is quite a delicate debate. So for us in the ITF, we haven't agreed that mandatory vaccination anywhere in the world is appropriate. So this isn't a position around the Philippines, but we also extremely hard advocates for taking the vaccine and then to get governments to make sure. Now, it would be different in a practical sense if there was an oversupply of vaccinations in the Philippines, and the seafarers chose not to do it. That would be a debate we will tackle further down the track. But the reality is it's not fair, in my opinion, just my personal opinion, that manning agents can say you have to be vaccinated. Conrad's just told you he's done a tremendous job, and thanks, Conrad. There's a bit of a mutual fan club between me and him. But the reality is he's only been able to vaccinate 30,000 seafarers. And last time I counted, or last time he told me he counted, the membership is 120 plus, depending on who's on board and who's not on board. And then the numbers, depending on which numbers you look at the height of Filipino deployment, could be as much as 300,000. So we like 30,000 is a drop in the ocean. So how could you start applying restrictions? And I think, I mentioned earlier, we really need to think about how do we live with COVID, and what do I mean by that, right? So we have to get the world's governments, and I suggest the richer governments support the poorer governments. We have to fund vaccines. Like, our world economy is dependent on each and every moving part. And if it doesn't make I hope it makes some sense. I kind of describe the transport is the blood that keeps the body moving of the global economy. Transport is 90% of all goods that are moved. So the seafarers that serve on the ships, the Filipinos that serve on the ships, the truck drivers, the warehouse workers, they are the people that need to be protected. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the UK or whether you're in the Philippines or anywhere in the world, you should have access, because the world economy needs you. If we go back to the crisis at the beginning and people were fighting, in the UK, we've kind of got flexible rules at the moment about moving around. We still have to wear masks on public transport. We couldn't get masks. People were fighting for them from China, filling up the containers. We couldn't get their medical equipment. In order to give you a vaccine, you need a syringe. Everybody has to remember that we've gone from 0 risk on a COVID to 100% risk. So it's taken a while for the world, the pharmaceutical companies, the legislators, to approve the vaccines and then roll it out. But it would be impossible if there were no Filipino seafarers, because they're carrying the medical equipment. They're carrying maybe less the vaccines because it needs to be kept at certain temperatures. So when we talk about respect, we need to give the seafarers the respect that have, frankly, been on the front line for the last 18 months. And we need a method of registering. Conrad and I have been in a lot of meetings about QR codes, how to facilitate green lanes, because ultimately, if you come to your PCR test and you join the AMOSUP pre-embarkation, in a perfect world, we want you to come from the province, get a PCR test, be negative, then get a vaccination, then do your isolation, and off we go, and approve all the way from Manila Airport, wherever you go, Doha, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, anywhere in the States, and get off and have respect. Because in the end, I had a chat with those seafarers in Doha who still need to go to work, still need to provide for their families. The money comes straight back home. So for us, we think for us, COVID has highlighted the weakness in government interrelations and cross-border strategies. and it must be, as we go through this, and we are working with the employers to be very honest about it, we need to put in place our solution and then convince governments to adopt it, because it's very difficult otherwise. Maritime, and I know you're going to talk to us a little bit about the Maritime Labour Convention. Maritime is unique in the sense that we have a history of working with the employers for the benefit of the industry, which in the ITF's terms means for the benefit of the working men and women who serve on ships, and particularly our friends in the Philippines. So we want to come up with solutions that make it impossible for the governments not to give us the vaccines that will provide us the solution. And then what's the booster methodology? How often do we need to have the upgrades? How often do we need to have the boosters to make sure they stay safe? And we know Conrad's, he's not just a renowned union leader, he's also a doctor and a highly professional with amazing people in the hospitals inside his union. He knows that the vaccines are not giving us 100%, but if you look at the statistics, it gives us the best chance of not spreading, 70% not contracting a very serious life-threatening illness. So it has to be, as we go forward, how do we live with COVID? How do we make sure governments supply our seafarers so that they can get back to doing what they want to do? And then just one, I'm not sure how many more questions you had, and I'm talking way too much. One big message out to the families of the seafarers. We really, really appreciate their patience, their tolerance. I've spoken to many seafarers who are questioning whether they stay in this career, because how to explain to their kids, their wife, their parents that they don't know when they're going to get off a ship and how long it's going to take to come home. And throughout this period when COVID's been prevalent throughout the world, but Philippines has been hard hit as well, you don't want to be away from your family if your loved ones are ill. So it's a massive thank you for them, for the support for the seafarers. Thank you, Lynn.
Yes, if I may, Lynn, also regarding that question, I wear two hats. I wear my AMOSUP union hat, and my union hat says that we should all be free to choose, right? And then don't force everybody to with the vaccine. But if I wear my public health practitioner hat, I will force everyone to be vaccinated. So there's a delicate balance between the two. So what we do right now is we have a massive, very massive information drive. We produce videos that you should get vaccinated, posters. Whenever people go to our facility to be vaccinated, we convince them to be vaccinated, and then we give them incentives also, and we try to tell them that have your children, your relatives, your neighbors be vaccinated as well. Thank you, Lynn.
And what are these health-related precautions, measures against COVID-19 implemented on board?
On board, we have before they go on board, they usually have a seminar or have an online meeting. So we tell them to always wear the mask, always do social distancing also, and the things that we tell them on board ashore here, we ask them to do that on board also as much as possible. Do not mingle with people outside your cohort, because that's where the infection comes in. Thank you.
And along the line of respect to our seafarers, there are provisions, MLC, on the rights of our seafarers, which should strictly be followed amid this unprecedented COVID-19. Should we have flexibility at this time? Because things are now out of control, such as border restrictions implemented by different governments. Sir Steve?
Okay, so that's a very good question, Lynn. I think, as I said at the outset, we've had a unique collaboration with the world's employers across all the modes of transport to respond to the crisis. But Conrad, Captain Greg Oka before him, were very much part of that unique process with us, with the ship owners, to get the Maritime Labour Convention ratified in the ILO system. It's recognised quite rightly as the most powerful convention in the maritime under the ILO bodies. Why? Because it gives the countries that ratify it the right to stop ships for non-compliance. So what does that mean? We have established a set of rules and parameters that are now recognized globally by nations and courts and port state control and inspectors. For the process of COVID, we allowed some dispensations also to the International Maritime Organization's regulations about inspecting ships. In theory, those ships are supposed to be physically inspected by inspectors, and we allowed some video processing and stuff like that. We did that, and again, there was also the original position that under the MLC, the maximum amount of time any seafarer should be on board a ship is 11 months, and there was some decision inside the ILO that because of the situation, they describe it as a force majeure. What does that mean? It means that they couldn't get seafarers off because the world shut because of COVID, but they soon revoked that decision as certain airlines, I mentioned Qatar Airways earlier, started to move. So the bottom line is, no, we shouldn't be more flexible, that there has to be, you know, a rule of law that is governed. You know, the UN system is put in place to bring a sense of harmony, but also structure. So the Maritime Labour Convention there is a safety net for seafarers. It shouldn't be watered down. We have at different times throughout the last 18 months, together with some of the ship owners, questioned about whether we challenge governments under the ILO system for their non-compliance with the Maritime Labour Convention in their own countries, because so many of them haven't facilitated the ability to move seafarer off ships. And ultimately that's in breach of the MLC. So we believe, so there are 97 flag and port states that have ratified the convention. All of them at different ways and different levels have failed to follow their own law and their own rules through this pandemic. And so, you know, we question the system that we've all invested so much in. And this is not a criticism of the professionals that work for the ILO or the IMO, who've been very supportive, but governments don't respect their own rules. Conrad and I know, as our leaders of global unions and a very powerful union in the Philippines, if we didn't follow the rules, we'd be very quickly attacked and put into a very difficult position. If we were not honest and transparent in our ways of carrying on, we'd also be put under serious challenge. So there has to be, and I think this is the big question as we go forward, and I think that was your kind of also your question about how do we deal with it as we move forward. There has to be a recognition of the weakness on some of the way the maritime industry is governed, and why we can be left in this perilous situation where we can't tell our members that you'll be able to leave a ship on a certain day and be home after you've done your contract. This is not breaching your contract. And there is a discussion. We're talking to many of the big ship owners who envisage that we will have a challenge now recruiting seafarers because of this 18 months, the uncertainty, the stress, the impact on family. So for us in the ITF, no to flexibility, and yes, yes, yes to enforcement. Thanks, Lynn.
Please.
Yes, also Steve mentioned about the MLC, and it provides rights for our seafarers, and it should be, as he said, should be strictly followed amidst this unprecedented situation. So MLC provides for the right of seafarers for access to medical care on board and ashore. So they have to have, especially now, we hear cases of seafarers not being granted access to medical care on shore. So this is very disturbing indeed, because some of the seafarers who have been suffering from COVID-19 and already severe case, not being given medical care ashore. It is outrageous, really. It is beyond comprehension. So this is the responsibility of ship owners, flag states, everybody, port states, everybody. So we should really reiterate that we should demand really for onshore medical services, especially for seafarers who are suffering from this condition. Thank you.
we have data on how many seafarers got sick with COVID-19 and recovered, and how many of them died of COVID-19?
Well, it's a great question. We actually don't have statistical evidence. It's been one of our weaknesses. And again, thank you for the job you do, Lynn, but we've also been speaking to many, many media outlets, TV stations, renowned newspapers, the broadsheets, as we would describe them. And the fact is, because our industry is quite fragmented, it's very difficult to get accurate numbers. We've coalesced with, as we say, IMEC, Intermanager, all of the employers' agencies. At the worst stage last year, I think we thought there were 400,000 seafarers over contract. We think it's half that number now. But we have, as Conrad mentioned, we've tested the sense of humanity. And we've got stories, and I won't go into detail because they're individual stories. But for example, a Russian seafarer had a stroke on board a vessel. We couldn't get medical help. We had to go to the IMO, to go to the country's IMO representative, to go back to the government to say, the seafarer will die if you don't give them medical treatment. And that's because of the COVID restrictions and the rules. We've never seen, the traditional position that seafaring is an honourable and professional industry that's globally respected. Governments shut their doors to the situation. And we've worked a lot. We have some serious challenges with our Chinese counterparts about crew change. And we've had countries where, we cover a number of seafarers from the Pacific Islands. Now, Philippines is a very popular country and has many overseas workers. So even though you've had a bad situation with civil aviation, there's still been flights moving. Many of the countries that we serve, Tuvalu, Kiribati, have had no flights at all. And we've had seafarers stranded in one places, and they've all more or less been isolated from society. And as Conrad said, let's be brutally honest, ships are pretty safe environment. As long as if you're not infected when everybody's on board, you're not going to get it, right? You have to get it from someone else. So it's been a very strange situation. So, we hope meetings like this week in London and other sessions we'll do with employers and governments and the UN Assembly will have to have another look at our industry, because we cannot put Filipino seafarers in such a unfair situation that they don't get vaccinations and they can't have a confidence about when they can go to work and when they can come back, and safely and healthily.
Coming up, cases of abandonment, are seafarers stuck at sea, and more on health and safety issues on board. We'll just take a short break. Maritime Viewpoints will be right back.
What if I tell you that KSIM Connect has become a reality? It is the cloud-based ecosystem for maritime education and training, where Kongsberg provides simulation and services to all members. As an instructor, my main goal is to educate and train seafarers to acquire skills promoting safety, sustainability, and efficiency at sea. At KSIM Connect, I can efficiently manage my simulators, my exercises, and my students. In the exercise archive, I can store my library of exercises, and if I want, collaborate and share them with my colleagues or others in the global community. KSIM Connect enables me to give students access to cloud simulation, so they can train anytime and anywhere while learning at their own pace. In addition, I can explore the library of models and exercise areas, download or subscribe those that fit the learning objectives. And I can even order spare parts or a service visit if needed. Kongsberg has started to create the future of maritime education and training by creating the community where instructors can find news, explore and download available simulator models, distribute or share exercises that fit the curriculum. Imagine using KSIM Connect to integrate our simulators in the same virtual exercise environment, enabling students to train and interact together. It doesn't matter whether you're in Singapore, Australia, or in the United States. As long as you're online, you are part of the knowledge-sharing community. Kongsberg is shaping the future of maritime education and training by creating the community. Let's continue building this community together for the benefit of ourselves and the entire maritime training industry. Join KSIM Connect today.
The decade began with fear, anxiety, and confusion. Global panic. The world facing a deadly pandemic with no respect for borders. Lives at risk like never seen before in living memory. Economies under unprecedented pressure. On vessels across the globe, seafarers were dealing with unrivaled challenges. The need for a global solution came up against the reality of nation-states with inconsistent rules. No access ashore, no personal protective equipment, no international flights. From locked-down cruise ships to hundreds of thousands of seafarers far beyond their contracts. Extreme fatigue, significant additional workload, and uncertainty about what would happen next became a part of daily life. Seafarer centres too were shut down by COVID, with social distancing making seafarers more isolated, more shut off from the rest of the world than ever. In ports, operations continued in spite of shortages of the necessary sanitary equipment and PPE. But through it all, as seafarers continued their vital role ensuring goods kept moving and world economies stayed afloat, the ITF Seafarers Trust has been there, because maritime welfare is and has always been our #1 priority. Over the past 4 decades, we have invested over $250 million into projects that improve seafarers' welfare. We have funded centres in ports around the world, vehicles to transport seafarers ashore, innovations to improve health and safety on board, counselling programmes and support lines, and many more initiatives to improve the welfare and well-being of seafarers. All these projects depend on collaboration with reliable partners working on the front line. Never have those collaborations been more crucial, more life-altering than during the COVID crisis. unions have been among the few organisations still working at full capacity during the pandemic, using trust grants to pay for the vital projects they've put in place to help keep seafarers safe and well. They've stepped up immeasurably, delivering emergency food parcels and vital PPE, increasing awareness around COVID infection, considering the impact on seafarers' mental welfare and the implications for their families, and making sure seafarers can stay in touch with their loved ones back home. With the backing of the ITF Seafarers Trust, unions have been able not only to sustain their support for seafarers during the pandemic, but to extend it. They have proved their commitment to their members and their communities and built greater capacity and credibility for their organisations. Through the COVID recovery and beyond, the partnerships between the
You're watching Maritime Viewpoints on Marine World Online. Our guests, AMOSUP President Dr. Conrad Oka and ITF Secretary General Stephen Cotton. I would like to ask your reaction, advice, or assistance to our seafarers on those who cannot join their vessels because of these travel restrictions, who have finished their contracts and disembarked their vessels but cannot go home because of travel restrictions. So we have seafarers, thousands of seafarers still with extended contracts on board because of the wage crisis.
So the ITF has nearly 150 ITF inspectors around the world, and we have a team here in London, and we have regional offices also around the world. And throughout this period, the biggest question that we've received from seafarers, and by the fact that you are the dominant nation when it comes to providing seafarers, the majority have been Filipino, have been asking our teams, our inspectors, particularly those that are on board ships, can I change crew? Can I get off the ship here? The ship owner's telling me something, you know, and I think we all know the challenges seafarers face when it comes to trusting their employer. So let's say there are some very good employers, but there are also some very bad employers who don't tell their seafarers the truth. I literally, I'm on LinkedIn and I get quite a few messages directly to me going, I'm on board this vessel. The ship owner tells me I can't get off at this country. Is that true? Can you tell me what the truth is? But don't tell them my name because I'll get in trouble. So there's a sense of hesitancy or fearfulness about getting in trouble, contacting the ITF. Frankly, most of the companies that have been with the ITF for a long time are having the same challenges as the seafarer. Most of the companies we deal with are not cheating the seafarer. It's the problem of the governments allowing them to move and or get off the vessel and transit home. But it's still not good enough, right? It's very difficult to explain. And I do write personal messages back to seafarers saying, look, we're doing everything we can, but this is governmental. This is, you know, I've spoken to the crewing departments of some of the biggest ship owners in the world, the MRFs, the MSCs, the CMAs, and they're as stressed for their seafarers as the seafarer, because this has been going on every month. I've got stories of one of those big companies agreeing to change 2 officers in Spain. So they were in Algeciras and they got off the vessel. They took a flight to Madrid to connect the flight back to their home country. Well, they weren't Filipinos. The flight was cancelled. Their dispensation under the immigration was only to catch that flight. They were sent back to Algeciras and got back on board the vessel. How terrible is that? I've got stories of Russians flying from Vladivostok across Russia to Moscow, down to Singapore, and missing a 24-hour window and being sent back. So that's not just the seafarer who needs to earn his money to join the vessel. Imagine the emotional well-being of the captain who thinks he's going to get relieved in Singapore and then doesn't. So these are things that we want as we move through this crisis and we come out the other end, and we will come out the other end. And I think that's the message I would like to give to the Filipino seafarers. And I promise on my behalf, and I'm sure Conrad will back me in, we are doing everything we can, day and night. My people are talking to the ship owners when there's a problem. We've got our inspectors communicating with the immigration authorities. We're doing everything we can to get seafarers moving, because we're frustrated as they are that we can't make it happen. We upset many ship owners when we talked about the middle of last year, enough is enough. Shall we call the world to a strike order? And many seafarers said, we would like to do that, but we're worried that we'll lose our jobs after we come back. And there's big discussions. So for us in the ITF, I think the message is try to stay as positive as you can. If you need any help, the ITF inspectors, Conrad and his team, my team here in London, we're all here for you. We want you to be able to travel home safely. And for those waiting who are now desperate to earn money, because we understand, no one goes to sea for the love of seafaring. They go to make money to provide for their family and give themselves opportunities to educate their kids and all of those challenges. We will find a better solution from this. And my sadness is I can't say it will all be okay by the 1st of January, because each time we think it gets better, something goes wrong. There's a new variant, there's a new challenge. But what we can promise is we'll do everything we can to defend them and make sure they can get home safely. Thanks, Lynn.
Dr. Oka, your thoughts?
Yes, it's very good that Steve mentioned about our inspectors who are stationed all over the world and are very helpful, especially with problems regarding this. Also, we can ask our seafarers, and I can tell you that Steve really and the rest of the team have been working very hard so that we can bring our seafarers, our beloved seafarers, back home and back to the shore. But if you have finished your contract, you have to. There are hopefully there are embassies wherever you are, and you can contact them, reach out to our government agencies, especially to our unions for assistance for return or repatriation. We have the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration here, and they have said that we have already repatriated around 187,000 seafarers already from the start of this pandemic. So, well, maybe there are still, I'm sure there are still more, but we have to ask them and tell them so that they can do something about our plight. So if you have extended contract, so we are here for you. And if you're experiencing emotional and psychological stress or anxiety, the AMOSUP has a hotline called MedConnect Telehealth Services, which you can contact, and a trained responder can answer your call if ever you need help. If you're undergoing anxiety or stress, and there's a trained responder who will going to answer your phone call. Thank you.
And are seafarer centers still open?
Yes, seafarer centers are still open. Our offices are still open, and hopefully the seafarer centers around the world are, but maybe because of the COVID pandemic, maybe for a limited schedule or a limited time. But our seafarer center is open here in Manila, in the port area. Thank you.
For the AMOSUP side, but Sir Steve, how about?
So for us, each part of the world is kind of functioning very differently. So here in London, as I said yesterday, it's Maritime Shipping Week, and lots of the governing bodies and they're all functioning and people are back at work and the metros are functioning and public and is happening. I think for all the seafarers, and Conrad's right, there's and again, congratulations to him and AMOSUP, providing that service to call people and talk about your problems or email or text or whatever is very important. So for us, all things will improve. Governments will get it right. We will come up with a solution that recognizes the need for seafarers to have vaccinations and get back to something a little bit normal. But in the end, don't be afraid of reaching out to us. Don't be afraid of asking us questions. We will take your direction. We won't talk to the employers if you don't want us to, but it is critical that you find a way to talk to people about your frustrations and concerns, because this is going to be an issue for us when it comes to the future of shipping. And we're talking to the world's ship owners about what are their well-being programs. How are you, in the end, COVID is attacking our humanity. And because governments don't really understand how the global supply chain works, and I genuinely mean that, when they put down those concrete barriers, they don't realize that means a Filipino seafarer can't get on board a plane, let alone his ship. So these things really need to be worked out in a much more constructive way.
I understand you just had your IBF meeting. Please share with us the conclusions.
Conrad, do you want to give first-hand information on that one? I was in the background, making sure that they were all okay, but they did a very good job from what I can see.
So for the central, because you have two different negotiations here. You have the central, which where we negotiate the central or the parameters where we will get the wages or the increase, and also we have the local negotiation where the local union like AMOSUP directly negotiates with the employer, with the employers groups or the employers, with regards to how we implement the increases based on whatever was talked about. So what was talked about was an increase, 3% increase for 2022, and another 1.5% increase for 2023, and also additional payments into the IBF seafarer support and the fund subject to the growth agreed with the parameters of the number of vessels covered. So yes, there will be an increase, and we thank you. We thank our social partners for giving the increase, although it was a very difficult negotiation during the negotiations for the central negotiation. But I guess we came out okay. We came out well, and hopefully during the local negotiation we can still get some. We get what our seafarers or our members really deserve, because it has been a really very, very difficult year and a half, and we hope that our social partners can see how we can really help our seafarers, because I'm sure it is also for the benefit of everybody. Thank you.
Can I just say that from what I can, Jacqueline Smith is the Maritime coordinator. She's based here in London. Dave Heindel is the chair of the Seafarers section, and Paddy Crumlin is the chair of the Docker section and the president of the ITF. They led the negotiations, and as Conrad says, COVID has challenged us in a lot of spaces, and negotiations by video, are perhaps the most difficult technical skill. It's not anywhere as difficult as being a seafarer on board a ship for more than your contract term. So let's not pretend. But they did a very good job to secure those levels of increase. I think anecdotally, and again, I wasn't directly involved, the ship owners, certainly in the conversations they've had with me, recognized sacrifices that the seafarers have made over the last 18 months. And they knew they needed to give a proper pay rise, and that's what we hope the 3 and 1.5% is. So big congratulations to the team. I know yesterday some of my colleagues here were working together with our colleagues from the IMEC on other collective agreements. So I know it's a very busy, they agree a central position and then they roll it out in each country where we have a strong union and a collective bargaining agreement. So Conrad has got to now negotiate by video with a group of international employers supported by the team here to get the AMOSUP agreement in place. But everywhere you know ITF is, Indonesia, India, Germany, Cyprus, we have the same job. So we have a lot of work to do between now and the 1st of January to make sure the ship owners can implement the pay rise and the seafarers can get the money in their pockets they deserve. So well done, team, really impressive.
And I understand there will be an upcoming ITF Extraordinary Congress. So please tell us about the agenda, Sir Steve.
Well, so I think this one is quite interesting. So we have under our constitution, we are bound by our rules. So we were talked earlier about MLC and governance. ITF has a set of rules, how you can become a member, what the benefits of being a member are, what's expected of the union if you're a member. But our constitution is quite tight. So we have to, by UK law, have our constitution, our Congress every 5 years. Because of COVID and because we did our last Congress in 2018 in Singapore, which was a lot about the growth in Asia Pacific. And Conrad was very much part of the future plans, not just for seafarers, but civil aviation, road transport in the Philippines. We haven't been able to deliver the work programs. So our consensus of the political group is that on the 23rd of September, we'll have a technical extraordinary Congress to move the next Congress from 2023 to 2024. Just to say a little bit that we're planning to have our first ever Congress in the Arab world because we've seen a lot of growth in trade unionism in Arab countries, the Gulf states, North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia. And we're hoping to bring maybe 3,000 people to Marrakesh in 2024. And I think it's a nice place to kind of, before we do closing comments, to say to the seafarers who will hopefully be listening to this, that the world will return to some kind of new normal, which will continue to involve good quality jobs under AMOSUP, and civil aviation will return to the skies. I mean, perhaps of all the transport workers, those that have lost their jobs in the biggest numbers are those our colleagues, women and men in civil aviation. But we plan for the future to be strong, and we plan for AMOSUP to continue to be the biggest seafarers union in the world. And I'm incredibly proud of Conrad and his team. So yeah, it was a privilege to have a conversation.
Any special concern you would like to emphasize, Dr. Alka, before we end the program? The continuous services of AMOSUP to our seafarers and their families.
Okay, yes, thank you very much, Lynn. We are looking at our demographics. Hopefully we can open a branch in Batangas City and Cagayan de Oro, so watch out for that. And also our counterparts from the JSU, Mr. Morita-san has been very, very supportive of Filipino seafarers. So they're building several dormitories for seafarers. I think they have 3 or 4 now, and they're building 2 more. So that's very great. That's very wonderful news for our Filipino seafarers. And also we've been directly involved with, as I mentioned before, with the IMEC and the other associations, and also with the Japanese ship owners, Japanese IMAJ, or International Management Association of Japan, Mariners Management Association of Japan, who has a new chairman right now, Mr. Inoue. So congratulations to him. So despite all these problems, I think hopefully, crossing our fingers, we'll get back to normal, or maybe a new normal. I hope a better normal. So yes, and of course, with Steve Cotton at the helm of ITF, the International Transport Workers Federation, who is also incidentally very, very active in the global union federations also. I think, are you the chairman right now or the president? Let's see. So we're really very proud of our General Secretary, Steve Cotton, because in the international world and also here in the Philippines, in the local world, he has been very helpful with all the projects, all the resources, and all the support that he has been giving to everybody. So my hat's off to you, Steve. So thank you very much for all the wonderful things that you've been doing for us. Thank you, Lynn.
Sir Steve?
Okay, well, I think I'm a little bit embarrassed, and so thank you, Conrad. Such lovely things to say. For me, part of my story to be the leader of the ITF and to have these other responsibilities is very much based on what I learned from Conrad's father and what Conrad brings to his leadership for the Philippines. And I am incredibly fond of the Philippines, and I'm not joking when I say I really miss you guys, because ITF has become more influential in transportation and frankly other spaces because of the caliber of the union leaders we have, like Captain Oka and Dr. Conrad Oka, and the ability for us to understand the challenges you face in the Philippines, but it could be India, it could be Indonesia, understanding that my life in the UK is quite different to Conrad's life in the Philippines, and understanding all the challenges that you face, all of Filipinos, about securing benefits, medical treatment, good education. So for me, it's a privilege to call him my friend, which is, and I really mean that, and I do miss him and all of his colleagues in the team, and they're a great team. He's taken over an organization and he's taken it to another level, and he's done it in a really humble and honest and frankly caring kind of way. I know it sounds a little soft for a male Filipino, but he's tough underneath, right? The reality is he's built more and more facilities, education systems, more buildings. And I haven't forgot, Conrad, the last time I was there, I put the foundations down, and I can't remember what they were the foundations for, but don't open it till I come back, right? I mean, open it, but don't open it formally. I want to cut the ribbon. I was thinking about that the other day, and the ambition, and what's more, and this is the bit, he mentioned our friends in Japan, but we could mention our friends in Japan and all over the world who believe in him and AMOSUP and the investment in the hospitals and the schools. And we're talking serious investment. It's a big operation that has to have good financial responsibility and fantastic. I've met many of his doctors, world-class doctors. So, I know we're being nice about each other, and this is a story for the seafarers, but there isn't a person who cares more about the Filipino seafarers than Dr. Conrad Oka, and I'm immensely proud to have the privilege to work with him. And just something to say about you, Lynn. I've watched your, can I say, empire grow into the foremost media savvy place for the seafarers. You get high level speakers from all over, and it is critical that seafarers can see me and Conrad and see government officials and ship owners and know or judge, let's call it judge whether we are doing a good job. In the end, me and Conrad are in it for the long run, but we're in it because of wanting to make their lives better. And again, I promise that me, all of the London team, the Singapore office, all the Indian office, all the offices all around the world that work for the ITF are committed to making working men and women's lives better and safer and more secure. And COVID has reminded us how fragile our time on this earth is and how critical it is that we do the best possible job we can in that time. So thanks very much for the opportunity, and we hope they all came home safely, and we hope that the next time we meet it will be physical and we can have a quick beer and say Mabu Hi in the most positive of senses. Thank you.
And of course, Lynn, we couldn't have done it without our beloved members, our beloved seafarers who have been sacrificing all throughout all these days since since the time of our ancestors, I guess, because the
Yeah,
Philippines
Filipino seafarer people. Fantastic.
it's a traditional seafaring country, really. And I think I think salt water runs in our bloods. So we'd like to thank also our beloved seafarers, their families also. Thank you very much for all your sacrifices. As I always say, we won't be here if we won't be here without you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And indeed, ITF and AMOSUP are great partners in serving our seafarers. Thank you so much, our sincerest thanks, Dr. Oka and Sir Steve. Thank you for your valuable time and thoughts. Dr. Conrad Oka, President of the Associated Marine Officers and Seamen's Union of the Philippines, or AMOSUP, and Mr. Stephen Cotton, Secretary General of the International Transport Workers Federation, or ITF. Thank you for watching Maritime Viewpoints on Marino World Online. See you again next Saturday. Stay safe.